Hi there. My name is Eric Herlock. I make a podcast about industrial hemp for Lancaster Farming newspaper, based here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And it's an honor to be here with the Hemp Feed Coalition today. I've been following what this organization has been doing for years now, and I see the work they're doing. Like, things are happening, right? So it's an honor to be here. So I'm going to be your moderator, and before we get started, just like quick housekeeping note, there will be a Q&A session at the end, and if you have questions along the way, drop them into the Q&A box at any time during the presentation. We'll keep track of that, and then hopefully we can get to your question at the end. So to kick us off, I'm going to introduce you to Wendy Mosher, who I first met in 2021 when I showed up at her office at New West Genetics in Fort Collins, Colorado. And she was like, sure, come on in. So it's been great to see the work that Wendy and her team have been doing in the years since. So I'll hand it to Wendy. Tell us about the Hemp Feed Coalition.
I'm Wendy Mosher. I'm the CEO of New West Genetics. I also serve as the vice president of the board of Hemp Feed Coalition. Just a little bit of history. I've been working with HFC since its inception in 2017. And it grew out of an effort that was mandated by Colorado state legislators and enacted by the Colorado Department of Ag. So what it did was say, hey, you have to look at whether hemp feed is something we should even be considering. So it drew together multiple hemp industry stakeholders, of course, but also experts in feed, veterinarians, Cattlemen's Association, APCO representatives, and the FDA were there as well. And out of that 6-month study came Hemp Feed Coalition. So we are a 501c3 with a mission to increase feed nutrition options, sustainable feed production, as well as increase markets for hemp. So you may have heard that it's essential in agriculture cropping to utilize as many byproducts of any plant. So this impacts you whether you are on the fiber side and of course on the grain side. If you are an animal feed mill, which we hope we have here, or a CPG brand, this is also an important opportunity for differentiation, meeting your customers where they are. No brand can continue to ignore that their customers are hungry to improve their diets, high quality nutrition, as well as their animals' diets, and to source that sustainably. So what exactly do we do? We directly submit applications to regulators for the approval of the use of hemp grain in animal feed. And then we respond with support for any needed clinical trials to enable those applications, whatever iteration the FDA or the other regulators are looking for. And there were no approvals before we started. So Hemp Feed Coalition was the consortium lead that achieved the first FDA recognized use of hemp seed meal in laying hens, and as well as the APCO approved ingredient definition of what hemp seed meal is. This was extensive and expensive work, especially being the first application. We've developed a great working relationship with those regulators throughout the process. So subsequent applications will be much more expedient. And next on our list for submission is a hemp seed meal application for use in ruminant feed. So I wanted to call out and thank our existing members. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate your support so much. As I mentioned, what we do is costly. So we ask the industry to join us. We have leveled memberships and other ways you can show your support, including in-kind donations. Beyond dollars, some examples of in-kind support are in the form of things like marketing support, seed meal samples, scientific expertise and review of applications or questions we may not have the expertise for. But our biggest need is cash, of course, and the use of funds are to pay our application scientists who couldn't be here today, Christine, as well as for additional analytics and trials that the FDA may call for. So please consider supporting, become a member, go to hempfeedcoalition.org. Again, we're a not-for-profit, so all of your donations are tax deductible. So thank you for joining us today. I'm going to turn it back to Eric.
Our guest is Professor Natalie Trottier of the Department of Animal Science at Cornell University. Her work focuses on animal nutrition, and today she's bringing us some early and genuinely fresh research on a question a lot of folks in this coalition care deeply about, whether hemp seed meal can earn its place as a feed ingredient for horses and pigs. Her talk is titled Hemp Seed Meal for Horses and Pigs, Early Insights and Future Directions. She'll walk us through why hemp seed meal is worth a serious look nutritionally, what we've learned from earlier studies, and the work her team at Cornell has underway right now. Professor Trottier, thank you so much for joining us. Handing it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Eric, for the introduction. I will share my presentation. All right, so the focus of this presentation is on early nutritional insights, acceptability, palatability work, and as Eric mentioned, some of the current studies that we have been conducting at Cornell. I will begin with the question, why hemp seed meal? I will then go through its nutritional value, especially in comparison with other common feed ingredients used in horse diets. I will then summarize previous acceptability and palatability work in horses, and then move into the current Cornell studies, including work in horses and pigs. So to start, let's look at the basic nutrient composition of hemp seed meal, compare with common ingredients in horse diets. So some of you might be aware that, of course, the primary ingredients that we feed horses before anything else is going to be forage, right? Either pasture, turn out on pasture, or hay if you don't have pasture available, or in the winter, if your pasture is not usable or too small, then we're going to be feeding horses hay. Depending on the hay availability, depending on the level of work that is expected on these horses, we will often feed them an additional part of their diet called a concentrate. And you can see this right here. This is composition of a concentrate. This is just a commercial concentrate that I'm showing here. So this is formulated to add to potential nutrient deficiencies that you can find in hay. Usually we're looking at less energy than we would than this horse would be needing. So we want to add a concentrate. We want to add some proteins as well. There's all kinds of different reasons why we want to feed these horses additional feed in addition to the hay, all right, or the forage. So again, let's start looking at the basic nutrient composition of hemp, and we'll look at more composition here in the next couple slides. But on a dry matter basis, the hemp seeds shown here contain about 30% crude protein. This is lower than soybean meal, right? Soybean meal being a legume, our favored protein ingredients in many parts of this world to feed animals. But it's higher than beet pulp, which is a very popular ingredient in horse feed. It doesn't taste really good actually, but nonetheless, it's really popular. It's higher than rice bran, which is a very popular ingredient in many of the horse concentrate. And this is just a protein content of an actual formulated concentrate here. Hemp seed meal also contains quite a bit of fat. The last hemp seed meal that we use in our current studies contain a lot more fat than this, but nonetheless, this is actually really attractive level of fat for an ingredient that is classified as a protein ingredient because it has more than 20% crude protein. Again, much greater than soybean meal, but here we have to think that this is cold press, expelled, and this is solvent extracted. So it is to be expected to have less fat in this soybean meal used in the example here. But beet pulp contain naturally very low fat. Rice bran is an attractive ingredient because of its fat content. And again, concentrate is about 7.6% fat. One of the most distinctive characteristics is the fiber content. So hemp seed meal has close to 49% neutral detergent fiber here in this slide. about 37% acid detergent fiber, which is always important to show along with NDF because it gives us some idea of the lignin content as well. So it places basically hemp seed meal at a much higher fiber than soybean meal and rice bran, and fairly similar to ingredients we would think of as fiber sources. This animation here below is just to show that hemp seed meal falls within the recommended NDF and ADF levels in horse feeds. Okay, right. So the next point is very important for horses, carbohydrate composition. So hemp seed meal is very low in starch. You can see here 0.2% in this analysis, right? We have a little bit higher in other analyses, but most of the time is less than 1%. It's also very low in non-structural carbohydrate and non-fiber carbohydrates, so 6.5, 5.4% respectively. And so this is lower, right, than other feed ingredients that we typically use in horse feed, right? Again, the water-soluble carbohydrate and simple sugars are also low. So again, this is very relevant because horse owners, horse nutritionists are often interested in low starch concentrate options, especially for horses and that may need careful management of starch intake. So when we combine the previous slide with this one, hemp seed meal provides moderate protein. It is classified as a protein ingredient because it's got much higher than 20% crude protein, which is a cutoff to classify as a protein ingredient. And fat, very interesting, and high fiber while contributing very little starch. So before going further into nutrition, it's important to clarify the current regulatory situation, which I'm sure most of you are well aware, but just a little bit of review here to make sure that we're all on the same page. So hemp seed meal is not legally approved as a feed ingredient for poultry meat, livestock, or pets. It has been approved solely as a feed ingredient for laying hens, with approval occurring in August 2024. If we look at pigs here, there's only one published study that has evaluated the protein quality for pigs, actually feeding hemp seed meal to pigs, not using a rat bioassay, which also very good indication of the protein quality. But for the interest in time today, I just wanted to focus on what has been done in the animals of interest. So only one paper that was back in 2011, so relatively old paper. And so large-scale studies, so this is a small study, still very relevant, but the large-scale studies are lagging. They're lagging because, they're limited. The regulatory challenges prevents food animal species, for example, the carcass disposal can be a major issue if these animals are fed an ingredient that is not yet approved. So you want to do large-scale studies, feeding studies, which require lots of animals to make it significant or applicable. But then what are you going to do with the carcass or the carcasses? It's just a big waste unless you can sell them local. So that is not to say that small-scale studies are not needed. They're also needed. They're especially useful at this stage, especially because they can really begin to generate the foundational data that we need for risk assessment, safety, and nutrient value. So we can still generate pretty significant critical data nonetheless. Horses have a little different, are a little different from pigs in many respects, right? For one thing, they smell a lot better. But I love pigs. They're very cute, and part of their smell is what we're feeding them as well. So let's all feed them lots of hemp seed meal, and they'll smell much better. So horses, going with tangent here, they're generally considered non-meat animals in this context. At least in this country, we don't need horses. So carcass disposal is really not the same issue. However, horses bring a different set of consideration that we're going to talk about here in a few seconds here. There's one published study that has evaluated palatability of ensign meal in horses, but it's about where we're at in terms of published work. So in addition, we need to consider the population of horses that may consume this ingredient. So it's not just your backyard horses that you use for pleasure riding, or small scale competition like 4-H, for example, or small local horse shows. It gets to be an issue, when we're looking at horses that are competing in sanctioned competitions. For example, competition organizations such as Equestrian Canada, the United States Equestrian Federation, or Fédération Équestre Internationale. All those have their own rules regarding substances and residues. So for horses, nutritional value is only one part of the story, one part of the question. We also need information on safety, residues, and potential relevance for competing animals that are competing in sanctioned events. So to evaluate hemp seed meal as a feed ingredient, several types of data are needed. First, we need a clear nutrient profile, and I think that we've generated a lot of good nutrient profile with cumulatively. So far, we've got several speakers that have presented nutrient profiles. We do have some publication on nutrient profile. So what does hemp seed meal provide in terms of protein, amino acids, fat? We've been running several amino acid profile too, because the data on amino acid profile is not very abundant. So we're accumulating some data here. Well, we have idea of fat, fiber, energy, minerals, and carbohydrates. So we're doing well in terms of profile. We need information on acceptability, palatability. These terms are often used interchangeably. They're not exactly the same. So acceptability refers to whether an animal is willing to consume a feed when it is offered. So in other words, if hemp seed meal is included in a concentrate, will the horse or pig eat it, right? So if it doesn't taste good, then let's just stop here, right? So that's number one. It has to be acceptable, it has to be palatable. Palatability usually involves some form of choice test. It asks whether the animal prefers one feed over another when both are available. So these are very precisely designed studies to really be able to address whether the feed tastes better than another one. And third, we need nutrient bioavailability. And bioavailability is not easy to measure. It's not enough to show that nutrients are present in hemp seed meal or that it tastes good. We also need to show how well those nutrients are digested and absorbed. And finally, we need safety and residue risk assessment for approval that includes target animal safety information, the ability to demonstrate to AFCO a margin of safety for intended use. Okay, so we're working here at Cornell towards this latter point. I don't have time to present that to you today. We're starting the study actually this coming Monday, but if you do have questions about this, I'd be happy to answer questions about what the study will be entailing, but it is a long-term study. Just wanted to present that very simple study here that I've shown several times. I really think it was very well done. It's simple and really to the point. So this slide summarizes a previous horse study by Springer and colleagues. So in this study, horses were offered 1 kilogram of hemp seed meal pellets over 2 5-minute periods with hay, 1 kilogram of hay offered in between. So what the researcher did very simply, they measured how much of the hemp seed meal, pellets, and hay, coastal Bermuda grass hay, were consumed over 6 days of repeated offering. And you'll see that after 6 days, basically the trend was very clear. The significance was very clear. So on day 1, day 1, 2, and 3, hemp seed meal pellets compared to coastal Bermuda grass. So first day, horses are like, what the heck? Just like, what is this new ingredients? What are those pellets? So here, lower intake, superscript B compared to A, so it is different. Here, again, second day, still different. And then by the third day, we're starting to actually approach no difference between the two. However, when you start looking into day 4, here we see really no difference between the two. And by day 5, and by day 5, we're starting to see a numerical increase. No difference since we're sharing a common superscript here between the two, but numerically higher. And by day 6, horses preferred the hemp seed pellets over the grass hay, over the coastal Bermuda grass hay. So that was our very first study demonstrating the palatability of acceptability of hemp seed meal. This was more an acceptability study. This is actually a real choice test experiment here that the same colleague, researchers did, the same group. What they did is they compared the palatability of hemp seed meal with other common feed ingredients, including big pulp, soybean meal, and rice bran. And the key point from this slide is that hemp seed meal compared actually favorably. So if you look here at rice bran pellets, they basically did not prefer the hemp seed meal over the rice bran pellets. But when we're looking at beet pulp pellets, obviously we have a obvious great decline in preference here. So beet pulp pellet did not win the game here. They're looking like the Habs right now. If you're just a Canadian hockey fan like I am, I had to turn the TV off last night because I couldn't bear seeing how the massacre going on with the Habs. Oh my gosh. Anyway, let's go on. So here, soybean meal. Again, hemp seed meal is more palatable, according to those horses, than whole soybean meal in this study. All right. Now I'd like to move on here to show the 3 different hemp seed meal that we have used throughout those studies that I'll be showing you today. And we don't have a complete analysis. We're realizing that we have some holes here and there, and we're trying to go back and complete some of these analyses. But the essential is here for us today. The first point is that there's some variation across samples, which is expected for feed ingredients, especially for byproducts, right? So we're looking at crude protein generally around 30 to 33%. We have variation between labs here. Here we're looking at Dairy One, University of Illinois, then IND Hemp, I'm sorry. Yeah, and so we do have, this is Cumberland Valley lab here, 32.9. Sorry, so across harvests and cultivars or varieties, and within the same cultivars, we have variation between labs. So that is to be expected. Crude fat. You can see here the latest hemp seed meal that we've been using. It's got a quite high fat content that was run by IND Hemp, and we're repeating this fat analysis here very soon. This is the lysine profile. I have the other amino acid profile as well, but I wanted to just show you how lysine varies, and it's basically mirrors a little bit of the protein as well. Calcium is low, right? 0.13, 0.15%. Phosphorus is higher, 0.86, 0.80. So that is something that we have to be very well aware of. Hemp seed meal can really change the calcium phosphorus ratio in a concentrate, especially the high inclusion rate. So one really needs to balance the diet, the concentrate, to bring up the calcium to phosphorus ratio. Calcium to phosphorus ratio has to be higher than 1. So one needs to add monocalcium phosphate definitely in those concentrate to bring that calcium concentration higher. The slides give additional information of the carbohydrate composition of the hemp seed meal that we've used in our studies. Again, here we're seeing a quite high NDF values with quite high value here in the latest hemp seed meal that we've been using, as well as with ADF. We're waiting on the lignin content. So lignin content in hemp seed meal is quite high compared to some of the forages that we're feeding those horses. And again, low starch, right? Low NFC, non-fiber carbohydrates, which is very desirable for those horses. Less than 1% starch, low water soluble carbohydrate and sugars, right? Ethanol soluble carbohydrate are your sugars, your monosaccharides and disaccharides and so forth. We also just did recently got the gross energy content analyzed because we're curious. We're going to be running digestible energy in the latest horse project, so we needed to know the gross energy of the hemp seed meal in itself as well. Just for reference, the gross energy value in a pure fat would be around 7,000 to 8,000. So a pretty attractive level of energy in hemp seed meal. So what does all of this mean for horses? So hemp seed meal has moderate protein with a balanced amino acid profile. It is a very good fiber source. It is very low in starch. It is palatable, appears to be very well accepted. And so these characteristics make it a promising ingredient, especially for concentrate or ration balancers type products when low starch and fiber contribution may be desirable, which is pretty much all the time for horses. But promising does not mean fully evaluated, right? It doesn't mean that. It means that digestibility and safety still need to be assessed carefully. And it doesn't stop here with our Cornell studies. I think we need to get a lot more data. But so far, I'm very, very excited because I think our data are very promising. So that brings us to the Cornell study. So it was important for me to take the time to really talk about some of the pros and a little bit of the cons and some of the constraints that we might be facing with horses, depending on the use of the horses. Is pleasure, small competition, going trail riding, or you bring those horses to sanctioned events. And of course, pigs, until we can, we're going to have to figure out a way to be able to do large scale studies. I don't know how we're going to get there, but in the meantime, again, the small scale studies are still variable and very much needed, right? So the first horse study, and I did show some of these data already for those of you who've never seen those data, it's kind of cool. It's very simple. This was one of my graduate students here, Taylor Walker. And this study was very simple. It was designed to evaluate the acceptability, not palatability, but acceptability of hemp seed meal when hemp seed meal is included in a horse feed concentrate. We used 4 horses in a 4x4 Latin square design with 4 periods. And so the horses were fed a orchard grass Timothy hay mix at 1% of their body weight, which is a bare minimum amount of forage you should be feeding those horses. The concentrate portion included hemp seed meal. It was substituted for soybean meal. So we had 4 concentrate we formulated. One that had no hemp seed meal, 1 10, 20, and 40% hemp seed meal. We started feeding those horses at 0.25% of their body weight and gradually increased to 0.4% of their body weight. So 0.4 kilogram per 100 kilogram body weight is what it means here. So the hay to concentrate ratio was maintained at 70 to 30, which is a desirable ratio. So again, the main question is very simple. When hemp seed meal is included in a concentrate at these levels, will horses consume the diet? So the slide shows the ingredient. First of all, I'm going to show the ingredient composition of the 4 concentrate. So as hemp seed meal increased from 0 to 40%, oats also decreased from nearly 60% to 36%. And soybean meal decreased from nearly 19% to about 2.3%. So we can really boost our protein content here with hemp seed meal and just go almost without any soybean meal. Timothy pellets, corn and corn oil were kept consistent across diets. And so this design allowed us to evaluate hemp seed meal as a substitute for soybean meal in the concentrate portion while keeping the diets practical and comparable. Now, because this was a very short-term study, 4x4, so we're looking about 30 plus days. We didn't adjust for the calcium phosphorus ratio, and also with the hay fed at 1% of their body weight, and this hay contained enough calcium, we were okay with not having to worry about adding monocalcium phosphate. But for a long-term study, like the safety study that we're about to conduct here, we are adding monocalcium phosphate in the diets. So here we show how the nutrient composition changed as the hemp seed meal inclusion increased from 0 to 40%. The DE, digestible energy, stayed fairly constant. Our crude protein as well, we try to keep it at 20%. We have a little dip here in the 10% hemp seed meal diet, but nonetheless, these protein levels are more than adequate. The MDF content increased as expected. And, again, the starch concentration dramatically decreased, from 37 to 22%, as well as our water-soluble carbohydrate. So increasing hemp seed meal, bottom point here, increasing hemp seed meal shifted the concentrate towards a high fiber and a low starch profile. So the results were encouraging, right? So there were no refusal, and the horses completely licked clean the concentrate from the zero, the one that had no hemp seed meal, to the one that had 40%. So, they licked clean everything. There was no hesitation at all. The daily average intake was nearly 1 kilogram of hemp seed meal per horse per day. Starch intake, if we compare it to control or the diet that had no hemp seed meal, we're looking at a 2/3 reduction in starch intake, grams per kilogram body weight of the horse. This is how we want to illustrate starch intake in horses. Even the 1.4 grams per kilogram is a really good level of starch, but we were trying to keep our fiber level very as high as possible in our control to be able to have a comparison, not apples to oranges between control and 40%. Fecal score was also normal, an average of 7.5. We didn't have cow patties out there. We didn't have, cat droppings either, right? Or poultry droppings. It was just what is to be expected for horse feces or fecal consistency. I don't have pictures to show you here, but, take my word for it. Now, the second horse study expanded on the first study. The first study was important because we're a little bit insecure, right? I mean, we can look at other studies, the acceptability study from Springer and colleague, but we wanted to make sure that, we wanted to be able to test it and push it to 40%. But then our second study, we're like, we're going to be bold here. We're going to move hemp seed meal to 60%. So we expanded on the first study. And this study, the objective was to evaluate the nutritional value and suitability of hemp seed meal as a major ingredient. So 60% major ingredients. So in the study, we're not only interested in whether the horses would consume the diets, but we also wanted to evaluate nutrient digestibility and other responses variables. So the study used 8 horses. Well, that's a lot of horses. And we used a replicated 4x4 Latin square design. So we had 8 horses and 2 squares. So 4 horses per squares rotating within, all receiving those diets, rotating simultaneously through 5 different time periods. So we had, again, for diets, a control, a 20, 40, and 60% inclusion rate of hemp seed meal. We also had a hay-only baseline period prior to randomizing the treatment periods. And that was important because We wanted to kind of stabilize the horses, get them used to eating this hay because they were coming off pasture. So basically coming from, chocolate to saltine crackers, right? So that kind of usually is a shock, but actually those horses really consume their hay readily, and we didn't have any refusal, any issues here. So then after about 10 days, we were ready to start our hemp seed meal feeding study. So we had, each period lasted 10 days. So it was a long collection or long period. So 10 days adaptation to the diet because we need to allow for passage rate because we're collecting fecal matter. So you can't just feed and collect in the afternoon or the day after because that feed hasn't passed yet, right? It can take 72 hours, before, depending on the composition, before you can actually start recovering what you planted, right? So what you fed and what you're harvesting at the end. It takes some time. So 6 days adaptation and then 4 days of fecal collection. So basically, this design allowed us to evaluate increasing inclusion rate of hemp seed meal while accounting for individual horse differences in period effect. So each horse is used as its own control. Really liked Latin square design in general for some of the studies that we do. The variables measured included body weight, body condition score, fecal pH, total tract apparent energy, digestibility of energy, NDF, and protein. Today, I'm just going to give you some preliminary values for protein. We're still working on NDF and energy, and we don't have the last period fecal material all freeze-dried yet. So that's still work in progress. But we have enough data to actually start telling a story. So it's really interesting. We actually what we did is we had 4 days of total collection in the morning and, 4 hours of total collection in the morning and the afternoon. And then that was done over 4 days. So basically, it was a partial fecal collection. And how do you basically estimate total tract digestibility without having to collect feces 24 hours continuously? Is that you have to use an internal marker that is indigestible or an external marker. So we use both. We use 2 internal markers and an external marker. And if you want to discuss that further or send me questions, I'd be happy to answer those questions for you. So again, increasing hemp seed meal, decreasing Timothy hay pellets, and decreasing oats. So this is how we basically maintain our formulation here, conducted our formulation, designed our study. Whoop, I wanted to go back here. And soybean oil decreased as we increased hemp seed meal because of the large amount of fat that we had in this hemp seed meal. And of course, we use molasses as a nice binder for all of our ingredients, especially the hemp seed meal, the particle size being different from oats, and those particles are pellets. So all these have quite different particle sizes. So molasses is important to keep those diets homogeneous. We don't have segregation of the fine particles at the bottom of the bag. So hemp seed meal is completely homogeneous in our diets this way. And plus molasses smell good and taste good. Now, the nutrient composition shows that crude protein increased with hemp seed meal inclusion. The DE was similar, but somewhat similar, but increased here with 60% hemp seed meal. And the nutrient and fiber remain within a practical range. We try to maintain NDF levels similar, and starch decreased quite a bit, again, as well as the water-soluble carbohydrate content. And so we're able to evaluate digestibility here. We have those fecal collection devices that are actually designed by a group of Amish and built by local Amish people, and a wonderful company that we dealt with. And so this is a picture of the different concentrate, where 60% hemp seed meal here. I apologize for the tape here that was quickly put together, but we'll have some nicer pictures coming along here. So again, so what we're seeing here, body weight was stable across all diets. Look at that. We had an average weight of 564 kilogram throughout the experiment. There were no meaningful difference between the diets or among the diets, the treatments. This suggests that over the length of the study, increasing hemp seed meal inclusion did not negatively affect body weight. Horses' weight over the length of the study is also important, because actually what we're showing is that these are individual horses, so the horses that were lower in weight just kind of maintained their weight. But overall, we have some kind of a trend in increasing weight, which is an important point. That body weight did not decrease, but rather increase a little bit, indicating like a good nutritional plan. So that was important for us to demonstrate. We complemented the body weight with evaluating body condition scoring using the Henneke system. So in this system, we evaluate fat cover at several locations, including the neck or crest, the wither, behind the shoulders, the rib area, recover, the rump, and the tail head. So body condition score is useful because body weight alone does not always tell us whether changes are due to gut feel, hydration, muscle, or fat stores. So it's an important tool. And this second image just reinforces the same scoring system by averaging each specific areas and calculating a final score. So from 1 to 9. So ideally, we want horses to fall within a moderate score. So here the goal was to monitor whether increasing hemp seed meal inclusion affected the horse's overall condition. So in a short-term digestibility acceptability study, we would not expect dramatic changes, but body condition score provides an additional practical measure of animal response. So that's very important to do. The body condition score did not differ meaningfully across diets. Again, this is where the score hovered throughout the experiment, a little bit higher than a 5. So horses were near ideal. So this supports the body weight data that feeding hemp seed meal at these inclusion rates did not negatively affect body condition during the study. Daily dry fecal output was measured in order to determine nutrient digestibility. So we need to figure out how much these animals eat, how much everything comes out of them, and the difference between the two, what is absorbed and what's absorbed relative to intake, is basically the digestibility percentage. So the fecal output varied somewhat across treatment, but there was no obvious patterns or differences that we could find at this point. And this is useful again because changes in fecal output can reflect changes in intake, digestibility, gut feel, or fiber fermentation. These data might change a little bit once we have our last period completely freeze-dried and feces analyzed. But we'll have to see. Also, this is important data for modeling nutrient management strategies for horses on farm. How much feces are these animals producing, right? So this is on a dry matter basis. So we have wet bases as well, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to be showing those data today. This was surprising. We wanted to monitor fecal pH because fecal pH is a very important indicator of gut health. There was a moderate decrease in fecal pH. So at the control, we had 6.8 fecal pH, went down to 6.66. So that's a moderate decrease. And this decrease in fecal pH may reflect changes in hindgut fermentation. Actually, it does reflect. As the diet composition changes, especially with differences in fiber. And what that tells us is that the composition of the hemp fiber, the NDF, is most likely very different, or at least different enough that it produces different levels of organic acid in the large intestine of the horse. So I'm very curious to understand the hemicellulose composition of the plant cell wall in hemp seed meal, because that would tell us a little bit why we're seeing a change in fecal pH. The good thing, though, is that the changes, even though those changes are measurable, it really remain within a normal range and not suggestive at all of a digestive upset. Really, when you get to a pH of 6 is when you're starting to really wonder, there's starting to be some indication of fermentation dysfunction and so forth. So protein digestibility. So this is like the haha moment, right? So we're not done with this. This is just showing in protein digestibility of the concentrate. Now we need to go and tease out, do some regression equations, all that good stuff to figure out hemp seed meal digestibility itself as a feed ingredient. Because we just didn't just feed that to horses. We wanted to feed it as part of the complete feed. Horses can be complicated, so we're not taking any chances. But you're seeing that the values range from, 63.4, to 66.3, with 66 being what we find in the 60% hemp seed meal inclusion. So these means are not different. And it is encouraging because hemp seed meal increased dietary food protein content in those diets, and the protein appeared to remain digestible at these inclusion rate. So again, very exciting. Let's shift a little bit here to a few slides on pig studies. The goal here was to determine whether pig would consume diets containing hemp seed meal and whether including hemp seed meal affect protein digestibility. So we did three little studies. Well, one major one that we just finished, but the first study had two parts. We did a repeated 3x3 Latin square. We had 3 diets, 0, 10, and 15% inclusion rate. Pigs were about 50 kilogram body weight. And then we did a whole track protein digestibility trial with 8 pigs, 2 diets with the 0 and 10% inclusion rate. And this was just a simple randomized block design. So what we found here is, again, I'm not going to spend time on the diet here, but we're reducing we kept soybean meal constant, increased hemp seed meal, and decrease wheat bran because we wanted to keep our diets as close as possible in an NDF. It was complicated because we didn't use crystalline lysine to maintain lysine content. So we have formulated those diets. For those who are a little bit familiar with digestibility stuff in pigs, standardized ileal digestible lysine. So this is the basis for formulating diets in pigs. And we maintain it at 0.98 without adding crystalline lysine. So we really had to play with hemp seed meal using some estimated value from the study by Presto in 2011, using the digestibility lysine values that he had or they had reported. So we were able to try to keep NDF, but see at the 15%, we had higher NDF and also higher AGF, right? But we worked with what we could and started mimicking what a pasture-raised pig would be fed, and they can't really be fed right now crystalline HCl or hydrochloric acid lysine. So these are the body weights that we're working with here, 54 kilogram to begin with, and about 65 kilogram to begin with in the digestibility trial. Look, here, what we're looking here is we're assessing growth performance, so feed intake, daily gain, and we're going to look at gain to feed ratio. So in terms of, go too fast here. So in terms of our daily gain, what we're seeing is our daily feed intake dose that was totally acceptable by the pigs. I love the stuff. Pigs love fibers. But at a 15% inclusion rate, at a 10%, this is not different, but numerically value is nice, right? It's nice to see, but there's no difference. But at 15% inclusion, we're seeing a decrease in daily gain, which is very similar to my colleague Xingying Lei found in chickens, right? Broiler chickens. At a higher inclusion rates, daily gain decreases. I think I do have an idea why this is happening. The gain to feed here is also very nice and maintained, 0.6, 0.65, but drops at a 15% inclusion rate. Total track protein digestibility, again, for those pigs, we did the 0 and 10% diet only, not the 15%. And daily feed intake, similar, daily gain, no difference. Gain to feed, no difference. And protein, this is total track apparent protein digestibility. All right, so this is very crude, but nonetheless interesting, showing that there's just no difference in apparent protein digestibility. Then the last study that we just conducted was a relatively involved study. So we had 9 growing pigs. We did a triplicated 3x3 Latin square design. So we had 3 squares going on at the same time. So that allowed us to have 9 pigs per treatment, which is very powerful. Here the pigs are surgically fitted with a little cannula that allows us to sample digesta coming from the small intestine at the end of the small intestine before it gets into the large intestine. And that's very meaningful because the digestibility in pigs is important for amino acid because amino acids are absorbed in the small intestine and not nutritionally useful to the pig in the same way. It's not going to be nutritionally useful once it's reaching the large intestine, and it's simply going to be excreted, and the values are changed because of microbes environment in the large intestine. So measuring at the ileum at the end of the small intestine gives us a better estimate of amino acid availability for these animals. And so the ingredient tested, basically we fed them purified diets, and they contained solely the feed ingredients like hemp seed meal, canola meal, and soybean meal. And that's the advantage of working with pigs, because you can feed them just one feed ingredients, and they're gonna, what you collect at the end is what you fed them, like the single ingredient, the test ingredient. So those pigs are tested 5 days, passage rate is faster, and 2 days of collection of the small intestinal output. By the way, these pigs do very well with those cannulas. When you're done with the experiment, we just take the cannulas out and the hole just closes up in a matter of an hour. A day later, you can't even poke your finger in that hole. So very, very cool data, I think. So this slide shows apparent ileal digestibility of crude protein, lysine, and threonine. So soybean meal here had the highest apparent digestibility values as expected for crude protein, lysine, and threonine. When we're looking at canola compared to hemp seed, so we have hemp seed, canola in yellow because of yellow flowers, and then soybean meal because of the nice little pinkish purple flowers when they flower. So we have here no difference between canola meal and hemp seed meal. Canola being a very common protein supplement, especially in northern US and Western Canada in particular. Soybean meal being our primary protein ingredients here in the Midwest and Eastern and West. So that's why it was important to compare hemp seed meal to those 2 protein ingredients. And here, what we're seeing is that the standardized digestibility. So what we do here is that we correct for endogenous losses, right? So there's a lot of protein and stuff coming from the small intestine, secretion from the pancreas that can affect, kind of corrupt your digestibility value. So we can correct for that. And when we correct for that, we see that our digestibility values get adjusted. And at this point, we see no difference between canola meal and hemp seed meal. There was no difference before, but certainly between soybean meal and crude protein. So again, very encouraging on a standardized ileal digestible basis that hemp seed meal amino acid digestibility is fairly comparable to 2 major protein ingredients, canola and soybean meal. Again, here, I even have to show you that canola meal was even a little bit lower, significantly, but in terms of values, not that much, but nonetheless significantly different. Other, 3 more amino acids of significance, your total sulfur, tryptophan, and valine. Here, we see that our canola is favorable, and our soybean meal as well for most amino acid except for methionine and cysteine when we compare hemp seed and canola meal. But when we actually look in terms of standardized basis, we still have a little bit of differences, but it remains basically mainly for soybean meal. And here tryptophan is important to consider when we're feeding hemp seed meal. Obviously, those digestibility values have to be used for formulation to adjust for the lesser digestible content. So if we put this in the context of gestating sows here, this is basically what we're seeing for gestating sow requirements in mid and very late gestation. And this is a lysine to crude protein ratio I calculated. And hemp seed meal would provide this lysine to crude protein ratio in gestating sows. So grower pigs is one thing. They're little, and a lot of fiber can really affect their growth performance as we want them to be growing for commercial purpose. Gestating sows have a very large intestine. They can intake a lot of fibers, and the more fibers, the better for them. And we're just starting to really understand that sows do have a large intestine, and they need to be fed fibers. So this is where we see hemp seed meal filling the gap for gestating sows. So this is a study that was done here, looking at different fiber ingredients for gestating sows and looking at the effect in lactation. I'm not going to show you the results, but they're very favorable, showing that those sows do better in pregnancy where they're fed high fiber diets. So we're looking at a control, 8% crude fiber or fermentable fiber to 23% fermentable fiber. And so they do much better compared to a conventional diet that contains only 8%. And so what I did here is I replaced this diet with hemp seed meal, all the fiber component, and I calculated what the NDF would be. So 31 here as compared to 32 for the other diets. SID lysine 0.66 instead of 0.46. So we even higher SID lysine values. The value that we don't have is the fermentable fiber percentage. We don't know how fermentable hemp seed meal is. Okay, so in summary, right, hemp seed meal palatability in horses did not differ from rice bran and was superior to some other common feed ingredients that we use to formulate concentrates or ration balancers. In the Cornell's work, inclusion rates of 40 and 60% hemp seed meal in horse balancers or concentrate produced diets that were nutritionally complete, palatable, low in starch, moderately high in fat, high in NDF, with an adequate lysine to crude protein ratio for horses, which I didn't have time to expand on that on the horse work. Now, for pigs, the data suggests that hemp seed meal could provide meaningful portion of the standardized ileodigestible lysine in gestating sow diets, at least half. In growing pigs, inclusion of up to 10% maintain growth rate, feed intake, and gain to feed ratio. And pigs really love the food, the hemp seed meal. High inclusion at 15% reduced growth rate and gain to feed ratio. I ascribe this to potentially anti-nutritional factors that we still need to, we're starting to do a lit review on that, really understanding how much of those factors might be present in hemp seed meal. But I do think that because of the great endogenous losses that hemp seed meal is creating in those animals, we have to provide more amino acids to those animals. So the requirement is for amino acid, not normal metabolic functions, but just ingredient induced requirements. Is increased, is what I think. So we would have to repeat those experiments, increasing maybe the energy content a little bit of the diet, as well as a little bit of amino acid as well. Total track protein digestibility did not differ. In terms of amino acid digestibility, comparable to canolamine for several amino acid, as well as soybean meal. So I think those digestibility values are going to bring us forward in terms of being able to formulate. They can also be used as proxy for evaluating hemp seed meal for sows, although direct sow studies are still needed. That would be super fun to do. Wrapping up, hemp seed meal has several nutritional features that make it a promising feed ingredient. Good quality protein, low in starch, high in neutral detergent fiber, highly palatable, well accepted, at least in the studies discussed here. So basically the overarching goal of these studies is to provide foundational data needed to inform future approval of hemp seed meal as an accepted equine and pig ingredient. At the same time, we still have important questions to address, right? We need more information on digestibility. We're not done. We need more studies. We need studies on safety. We have this upcoming one here starting Monday, and residues, which we're also going to be working on in this upcoming study, and practical inclusion rates across species and production contexts. I would like to close by acknowledging the many people and organizations who contributed to this work. Thank you to the graduate students involved in these studies, Cameron, Livia, Taylor, and Eugene. Thank you also to Hans Stein at U of I that graciously adopted one of my graduate students to run the ileal cannulated pig studies. All my undergraduate students, the Cornell Animal Science Research and Teaching Barn, working with us with those horses, the equine, Cornell Equine Park, IND Hemp, the Hemp Feed Coalition, obviously has been very supportive throughout, grant writing and so forth, Foundation for Food and Ag Research, and New York State Department of Ag and Market. And of course, Larry Smart and Joe Watchlock have been my mentors throughout, since I've been interested in working with cannabinoids and hemp seed meal as a feed ingredient. Thank you so much. And thank you for attending today's webinar. I'd be happy to take questions if we have time.
All right. Thank you for that, Professor Trottier. That was terrific. A lot to take in. Yeah, all this talk of hemp feed is making me hungry. It's lunchtime here in Pennsylvania. But yeah, that was great. So we do have a little time for some questions.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it looks like actually a question's coming in from Larry Smart, but it's not for you. It's for Wendy or Andrew. So hopefully they're on board for taking a question. Let's see here. Oh, Larry also has a comment about a sports metaphor that I didn't understand. But if he's on the call, maybe he can explain the hockey reference. All right, as I'm looking for Larry's question here, I do want to, I'm really excited that by day 6, the horses prefer hemp seed meal. And I really wish there was a way we could let the other horses know that there's something good coming for them. All right, anyway. So yeah, here's Larry's question. This one's for Wendy or Andrew. He says that he's producing hemp seed meal for these studies and has done third-party cannabinoid testing. The results came back clean, but he's concerned that the lab's detection limits aren't sensitive enough to actually prove compliance with the feed ingredient thresholds, especially on THC. His THC quantification limit is around 14 parts per million, but the standard is 2 parts per million. So 2 questions. Is that testing sensitive enough to satisfy the definition? And can you recommend a lab with tighter detection limits?
We certainly had to work with Eurofins, to have adequate detection. So, but that was in the egg. So let me look into it and see, what we can find. I know we have a list of labs that can do this, so I'll just have to look back at the list. Good question, Larry. We need more of them to do it. Thanks for the hard one. I have a question. Can I ask?
Yeah.
Okay, please. Cool. That was great, Natalie. Thank you so much. Gosh, we need researchers looking as detailed as you can, because we know this is the kind of data that the FDA is looking for. I'm going to ask you a question that a researcher probably doesn't want to answer, but I'm going to ask you to take a leap. What do you predict maybe its competitiveness were it solvent extracted. So, which would assume that it's dehulled first, right? So it's got less fiber, less fat. How do you think it would do?
So your question is, you're asking me whether or not it would make it more competitive? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking what its competitiveness would be, because it would lose more of its positive attributes, right? It would lose some of its fat.
It would lose
and lose
fat,
its
right?
fiber, because the hull would be removed before it's solvent extracted.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you, think about soybean, right? I mean, I'm getting a little bit out of my lane here, even though I'm bachelor in agronomy, right? It's been a long time, but we have different soybean meals. We have one that is, that in the solvent extracted soybean meal. We have one that is less protein, but has the hulls.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And we have the dehulled, solvent extracted as well, which is higher protein on it. So, do you have to, dehull them? You have to dehull the seeds in order to do a solvent extraction? I don't know.
It's generally accepted from the solvent extraction experts that I've spoken with that it would be treated like a soft seed, more like canola, and be dehulled. But at scale, I don't see why it couldn't have these versions that soybean has. But let's assume it is dehulled. And it's okay if the answer is I don't think it would be competitive. But so that's my question. Let's assume it's dehulled. How do you think it would do?
I mean, the only difference, right, is, well, for one thing, the protein content is going to be higher, right?
Right. True.
And I don't think the starch is going to move a whole lot because it's already, very low. So it might bring it to maybe, I don't know, maybe 0.7, 0.8, but I'm sure it's going to stay at less than 1%, which is great, right?
Right.
All right, so then we're losing the potential benefits of some of those good fatty acids, right?
Right.
And so I didn't talk about that today. And that's another can of worm, and that's another maybe it's not a can of worm, it's another area of interest that we could be tapping in. But yeah, so we're losing that sort of claim of like beneficial fatty acids. But right now, our work at Cornell is not about like, you're feeding beneficial fats and all that stuff. It's really like we're feeding, an ingredient. We're using an ingredient that is super safe for horses, right? Assuming like no mycotoxins and no molds and all that stuff, which is the same for any other ingredients, right?
Sure.
But yeah, so I don't think so. I think we'd have higher protein content, and the fiber content, might be less. How much less? I don't know. Right, it will be less because you don't have the hulls, but
right, okay.
Like canola meal is not dehulled, right? It's the whole seed, right?
Yeah, I think in some cases, and then in others it is dehulled. So
is it? Okay.
Yeah. So so it might just be, more equal then, right? It might not have these great benefits, and some of it will always be mechanically extracted. So that you always have those kind of premium markets for the fatty acid added, right? Or enhanced meal. Yeah. So
I think actually, you just said, Mike, I think it creates another ingredients, right?
Yeah.
And one could like, I'm dreaming of like potentially like coming up with some really cool concentrate, like the one, you could have the different concentrate and you can make different claims depending on the concentrate that you're using. One is going to be more expensive. The other one is going to be less expensive, but at the end of the day, you still have that really good fiber coming from the hemp seed meal. So.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a question here from Mayara. She wants to know, did you observe any behavioral or metabolic changes in horses fed higher hemp seed meal inclusion rates beyond intake and fecal measures, for example, energy level, excitability, or recovery?
Yeah. So I'm just not sure about the recovery aspect. Are we looking at recovery from exercise? Because these are all horses at maintenance. But no, we didn't see any changes in behavior. And then, then again, this was not a study that was designed to look at behavior, right? So behavior in itself is a very specific field. and I will never pretend that I'm a behaviorist. So if we wanted to look at behavior, we'd have to design a study specifically looking at changes in behavior. But from what we've seen, no. And then also, if nothing else, less starch, so the anecdotal evidence about like a hot feed is a feed that has a lot of starch and all that stuff, right? The higher energy here could be, would be attributed to more fat from the hemp seed meal, which is the good hot feed, if you want to call it like this. But no, I wouldn't. My hypothesis would be that there's just no difference in behavior. On metabolic, we're going to be doing full blood panels here with our long-term studies starting next Monday. So we're not planning on doing glucose or something, but we'll do a complete blood test, so we can include glucose. I think that would be pretty cool. So yeah, good question.
All right, thank you. And just to get back to Larry Smart's hockey stuff here, he was asking originally if hemp seed meal is it's the Carolina Hurricanes of the feed ingredient world. And then he chimes in, he says, sorry for the confusion, Eric. Natalie was comparing the poor performance of beet meal to her Montreal Canadiens, who were crushed by the Canes last night. By the way, the Habs beat my Sabres, so maybe they are the apple pomace of the ingredient world. So thank you. Thank you.
Good Lord.
I had a hard time falling asleep last night, not because of my upcoming conference. I was just so troubled. I had to turn the TV off. I couldn't stand it anymore. Oh my gosh. Yes.
All right. Well, I think if we don't have any more questions, we're going to wrap it up. So I do have a little thing here. So yeah, we're coming up on time. I want to wrap up. Professor Trottier, thank you so much. This was a really clear look at where hemp seed meal stands and where it's headed. I think you've given the coalition a lot to chew on. I want to also acknowledge the team and partners behind this work, your students and collaborators at Cornell, and supporters including FFAR, FAR, the New York State Department of Agriculture, and the Hemp Feed Coalition. Before we go, let me point you toward our next session on Thursday, June 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We will be joined by Kimberly Wellman, who will be presenting the inclusion of hemp seed meal in growing cattle diets. So if today sparked your interest, mark your calendar. We'd love to see you there next month. Thank you all for joining us today. And thanks again to Professor Trottier. My name is Eric Herlock. You can find me on the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. So until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper.